Welcome, everybody out there in podcast land. It is time for the be all end all rock and roll podcast. Yes, it is time for the Fortress of Rock. I am your host, the Maestro, Kevin Crane. As always, glad to have you aboard every Friday night. This time around, it's May the 17th, 2024, episode 144 of the Fortress of Rock. And as always, we start off with news of the world, our tribute to the late, great Freddie Mercury and Queen. So let us get into it. Now, a lot of what we're going to be talking about here throughout this episode will have to deal with Sebastian Bach, of course, former lead singer of Skid Row. We have a review and breakdown of his brand new album, Child Within the Man. But the big news coming out is that this past week he has said there is a good chance, and that's a quote, that Skid Row could reunite in the near future. Sebastian Bach says there has been a miscommunication. Again, another quote, direct quote from him, where he has got to compose a very detailed, precise, apologetic in some ways, I would assume, email to Rachel Bolan and Snake Sabo. But the timing is perfect, because once Sebastian Bach gets done with his solo tour supporting his new album, and once Skid Row gets done with their brief run of shows with Lizzie Hale, which, by the way, if you get, I know there's only 4 shows involved here, that has got to be a must-see. But if we could finally get those core members of Skid Row back together, and I will discuss this more later when we get to a review of Child Within the Man, I will go into detail as to why this is the only way this can work out for the betterment of all of them and all of us. Now, Styx getting ready to go out on the road here with Foreigner. We mentioned a few months ago that they had some issues with their bass player. Now, it was a mutual agreement that he dropped out, but now they have found their new bassist, and that will be Terry Gowan. And of course, you can tell by the last name, he is the brother of Lawrence Gowan, who has been their primary vocalist and keyboard player, basically taking over the duties for Dennis DeYoung. Dee Snider gets it. Dee Snider gets it. He echoes what we have said here in the past on the Fortress of Rock. Of course, we'll be giving you a review of him solo live later on this summer as part of Party Gras 2.0. But Dee Snider basically, with all the, he's not necessarily diplomatic. He spouts a lot of vitriol, but for me, most of it I am down with and I agree with. And this one, I especially 100% agree with him. We talked about Jimmy Buffett and the MC5 and how it would have been a little bit more considerate of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame to induct both of them, Jimmy Buffett and the MC5, when they were alive. Of course, the MC5 we mentioned to you here within the last week that their original drummer, Dennis Thompson, passed away, and he was the last surviving original member of the MC5. So Dee Snider sees that, he gets it. He's got a much bigger bully pulpit than I do. So he gets out there and he says, hey, Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, let's induct these bands and these performers when they're alive. And it just seems like, doesn't matter if you're talking sports, music, movies, they penalize certain performers because they probably didn't get along with the media, did something wrong, maybe ran afoul of the law. Although in this day and age, I don't think that matters at all. That almost ends up being a badge of honor. But kudos to Dee Snider for finally getting out there and backing up the Fortress of Rock and a lot of other outlets who have said, let's get these people in the Rock Hall of Fame so they can enjoy it and we can honor them while they are still alive. All right, moving on to media. TVs, movies, streaming, all that good stuff. Sony Pictures Classics has acquired the first authorized documentary of Led Zeppelin. The movie is Becoming Led Zeppelin. It's kind of a combo documentary, biopic, and concert film. So, Sony Pictures Classics, normally they put out these movies in the theaters. So, I will be very interested to see how this performs in the theaters. I think it'll do fairly well on a limited basis. Of course, they're not going to put it in 3,000 theaters, but they somehow get it into 600, 700 theaters for a limited run. Love to see that. I would love to see it, and especially would love to see it on an IMAX screen. Wouldn't that be awesome? Instead of yet another cruddy Disney movie. Get some rock and roll up there on the big, huge screen. Don't have a release date yet. But eventually we will have Becoming Led Zeppelin out again, probably in theaters at some point within the next year. Now, moving to streaming, I guess this one does not warrant going into the theaters. A new Bruce Springsteen documentary, Road Diary, which will detail his preparations along with his E Street Band brethren for their last tour. Of course, that was the one where they decided to go with dynamic pricing and screw over all of their fans who weren't making at least 6 figures a year. But I digress. So I'd love to see if he addresses that in this documentary, but he won't because, of course, it's going to Disney Plus as well as Hulu in October. Not a specific date out there yet, but you know if Disney's involved, they're going to buff and polish and shine it all up. So there's absolutely no controversy whatsoever. Yes, I am bitter. I am not the biggest Bruce Springsteen fan right now when it comes to his performances and how he deals with his fans. I think he's a phony, and I've said that for years. I think he's a manufactured icon. And if you look back and dig deep into the archives, past stories in rock and roll history, look back at how his persona was constructed for Born in the USA. That's all I'm going to say. All right, and of course, we have a connection to Bruce Springsteen, unfortunately, in a negative way when it comes to this week's deaths and passings in the world of music and rock and roll. Man who played on 10th Avenue Freeze Out, one of Bruce Springsteen's all-time greatest songs. Yes, again, I can separate the fact that Springsteen is a phony from the fact that he's put out some phenomenal music. David Sanborn saxophone, jazz legend, unfortunately left us this past week. Also played on David Bowie's Young Americans. And then the original drummer for Jefferson Starship, not Jefferson Airplane, Jefferson Starship, John Barbata, passed away this past week. So our thoughts and prayers out to the family and friends of John Barbata and David Sanborn. Steve Perry. Who? Who? Who is that? What? Who? Yes, Steve Perry, legendary lead singer of Journey, who has pretty much dropped off the face of the earth for the most part, has now signed with a new record label, which he is saying has reinvigorated his creative juices. Now, he's worked recently with a band we've talked about called The Effect, featuring the Prodigy, the kids. They are prodigies, but they are also the kids of great rock and roll stars, of course, Nick Collins, son of Phil Collins, and Trev Lukather, son of Toto's Steve Lukather. And they have revived Steve Perry. They have taken a deep track from, I believe, Raised on Radio, one of the last albums that Journey did with Steve Perry. And now he's getting ready now, maybe new music coming. But the big thing is he's looking at going back out on the road for the first time in 30 years. Now, I would say buyer beware on this, because without Neil Schon, does this mean we're going to get more of the ballads and not as much of the more rockin' up-tempo Journey stuff? That would be my concern. I would really have issues and problems with seeing Steve Perry unless I got some kind of guarantee that I'm going to get some of the more upbeat rocking stuff. Wheel in the Sky, Love and Touch and Squeezing, Escape, Mother, Father, Stone in Love. But without Neil Schon on guitar, I don't know if it's feasible. But still, it's good news if Steve Perry is going to give it one more shot and get out there back on the road again. So this would be a good way to segue into our weekly look at tour news. Now, normally I don't like to discuss tours that have begun. We've probably mentioned it months ago when the tour was announced. So what's the point of saying, hey, that tour we talked about 3 months ago, it just started. But in this case, this is a big deal. And some of you will go, well, why you didn't talk about the Rolling Stones? Yeah, I did. I talked about Mick Jagger making a fool of himself in New Orleans. Remember that? But this one matters. This one really, really matters. AC/DC. First time out on the road in 8 years. Their European tour began here within the last night or two in Germany. And I looked at the set list. I normally don't like to do that, but in this case, there are no American dates set up. So I'm not spoiling anything for myself. But I will say this. If that set list holds, and if they do announce American tour dates for 2025, which is what we're all hoping, 24 songs, and I would say 21 of the 24 are absolute perfection. There are a couple that I would tweak and change, but I'm nitpicking. By far and away, this could be the best set list given the fact they're still trying to play new songs off their last new album, this is pretty close to perfection in terms of a set list. So, and again, 24 songs. How can you argue with that? But no announced American dates right now. So that's a little disheartening, a little depressing, but we'll see what happens for 2025. I don't think it'll happen in 2024 because too late in the game now. They're going to play big outdoor football stadiums. They're not going to play smaller venues during the winter. I just don't see that happening. If they do, great. But I don't think that's going to happen. But very encouraged to hear everything went off without a hitch. The start of the European tour for AC/DC. And again, 24 songs, ridiculously awesome set list. Now, the Foo Fighters haven't had a lot of tour dates this year. Now, they're doing a lot of festivals, which is fine. I would have preferred a full-on stadium and arena tour, but we're not getting that yet. Maybe, again, we get that over the winter or even in 2025 from Dave Grohl and company. But at Welcome to Rockville here recently, this is why Dave Grohl is the man in rock and roll right now. This is why he is the be-all, end-all, most brilliant. He is the clown prince in a good way. I mean that as a compliment of rock and roll. At Welcome to Rockville, one of the festivals the Foo Fighters have been playing recently, he goes, and you can look at it on YouTube. It is classic. It is awesome. As he goes on a rant about how he never gets to play a solo, and he finally wants to play a solo. And so he starts to play, quote unquote, play the Van Halen classic instrumental, Eruption. He does a pretty good job of faking everybody out, even with cameras on him up close. For at least 5-10 seconds, he has you fooled. And then the great misdirection comes into play, and we see on the screens, the big screens off to the side, that it's actually Wolfgang Van Halen playing his father's signature guitar solo. What a great, great moment in rock and roll. I am sorry, this is a classic moment in rock. Because they're having fun, they're honoring the great Eddie Van Halen. And of course, Wolfgang has been very, very hesitant to play his father's music, but it seems like Dave Grohl is the one guy who can pull it out of him, whether it's at the Taylor Hawkins tribute shows or here at Welcome to Rockville. An unbelievably great video. You've got to get out there on YouTube and watch it. It's phenomenal. A little bit of Hot for Teacher in there as well. Wolfie throws a little bit of Hot for Teacher in there along with Eruption. So check that out, kids. It is well worth 3, 4, 5 minutes of your time to check out that video on YouTube. Now, actual tour news, tours that are happening. Of course, the big summer shows, for the most part, we've already covered them. We're in May. I don't see a lot of people announcing June, July, August shows. Those are set in stone and done now. So we're heading on later into the year. We mentioned David Gilmour, of course, formerly of Pink Floyd, playing some shows overseas in jolly old England, playing the Royal Albert Hall in October, And you figured he was going to play some shows in America. But he is being very, very exclusive with where he's playing and how many shows he is actually playing. So now David Gilmour has announced he will play 2 shows in Los Angeles and 2 shows in New York City. And of course, he had to pick arguably the most prestigious venues in both of those cities. He will play October the 29th and October the 30th at the Hollywood Bowl. And then he will play November the 4th and November the 5th at Madison Square Garden. And we discussed previously on a prior episode how he's debating whether or not he is going to play Roger Waters' material. So we'll see. Once we see the set lists later on this year, we'll see if he caves or he sticks by his guns and only plays material that he sang or wrote for Pink Floyd, along with, of course, I'm sure some solo material as he's got new music coming out. And then finally, to wrap up news of the world, you know, we love Godsmack here on the Fortress of Rock. And they are always, it seems like, always out on the road. Well, they have announced the fall leg of their current tour. Now, this is not the acoustic stuff that they were doing earlier this year. I've talked to some friends of mine that saw that particular leg of this tour. If you want to call it a separate tour, that's fine. They said it was not impressive in the least, and they are big Godsmack fans. So kind of worries me that they did not like what they got earlier this year from Godsmack. But now, supposedly, this tour is back to full force, head-on rock and roll. The opening acts will vary. 19 U.S. dates through September and October of 2024. So, even though I've given you a little bit of a buyer beware caveat emptor from a very good source who I trust, that Godsmack is kind of, the luster is off, let's say. And seeing them last year, I would tend to agree. I saw them, of course, we reviewed it last year as they had Stained opening for them. Still not a bad show. But when I've got true blue Godsmack fans telling me right now they are not impressed or happy with what they're seeing with them live, they said a lot of cover songs here recently on this little acoustic intimate tour that they had. And we talked about that months ago. So again, buyer beware, but Godsmack supposedly going back out full force, hard and heavy rock and roll in September and October. So that will do it for segment 1 here on the Fortress of Rock, episode 144. Plenty more to come. Lots to review this week. We have got tons of music for you. We have got the new album from Sebastian Bach. We have got 3 new songs for you. And we have got a movie review, as I will let you know what I thought of Bob Marley, One Love. So a quick, cheesy 2 or 3 second music interlude, and I will be right back. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Fortress of Rock. I am your host, the Maestro, Kevin Crane, episode 144 here on May the 17th, 2024. Lordy, 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 do we have a lot to discuss here and break down. Of course, this is where we review the best in new music, albums, singles, concerts. Breakdown is our tribute to Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. And this one could go long because we have got a ton to review and discuss. Let's start off with the new album. from Sebastian Bach. Of course, Sebastian Bach, as you all know, former lead singer of Skid Row. Great news in the first segment, where Sebastian Bach sounds a little bit contrite, a little bit apologetic, saying that he can see the light at the end of the tunnel when it comes to getting back together with Snake Sabo and Rachel Bolan and getting Skid Row back together as best as they can, as close to they can, in terms of the original lineup that gave us 3 ridiculous albums. Of course, Skid Row, Slave to the Grind, and Subhuman Race. But Sebastian Bach still putting out new music. Child Within the Man is Sebastian Bach's latest solo album. And I will say this, and it's not just Sebastian Bach. Maybe it's me. Maybe I'm getting too picky. But you guys have listened to my reviews over the past few years. Actually, we're almost on to year 4. Getting close to year 4 of The Fortress. So well over 2 years. Closing in on 3 full years of my reviews. And you know, I am picky. I am very picky. I expect greatness from the bands, the performers that I grew up with, that I know that I love, and the new guys as well. And for the most part, I get disappointed. And unfortunately, here with Child Within the Man, despite the fact that I absolutely loved the first 3 releases from this album, once again, just like, I hate to say it now, 60 to 70% of the albums that we get. And this is marketing. I get it. This is marketing. You put the best foot forward. You put the best stuff out there first and foremost. And that's what you have to do. I understand that. But in the end, how about you take some pride and some credit for making an entire product that is worthwhile for the consumer? And again, more often than not, we are disappointed, severely disappointed. And I unfortunately have to say, with Child Within the Man, yes, it's the same old song. But you know what we do here on the Fortress of Rock when it comes to new albums? Each and every time we review a new album, we go through it track by track. So we start off with Everybody Bleeds. And this is one of the 3 singles that we've already reviewed. And Everybody Bleeds is awesome. And this is part of the reason why I had unbridled hope for Child Within the Man. Now, my criticisms in the past for Sebastian Bach as a solo artist have stemmed from the fact that the same old criticism. And it seems like I talk about this every month, if not every 2 or 3 weeks. We talked about it recently with Mark Knopfler. You can bring up Steve Perry. Of course, we mentioned him in the last segment. You can bring up Sting. The lead singer, the lead songwriter, gets an ego and says, I can do this without these guys, the drummer, the guitarist, the bass player. I don't need them. And being the cynical man that I am, I'm beginning to wonder if it's not just about money and they just want a bigger share, a bigger cut of the pie, instead of actually caring about how good the output is. Because it's obvious to me, again, Everybody Bleeds, first song, phenomenal from Sebastian Bach. And I will tell you, we'll go through song 2, song 3, and song 4 right now in succession. Song 2 is Freedom. Another solid rocker. This one featuring John 5. He is the new of course, lead guitarist for Motley Crue, replacing Mick Mars. John Five, great guitarist. He adds a jolt of energy to Freedom, makes it a little bit something different, but still rock solid. Meat and potatoes, metal, love it. And then the next two songs are the other two releases that we've already discussed. Track 3 is Hold On to the Dream, which is the best, by far the best song on the album. This was the third single released from Child Within the Man, and it is the best song. It tricks you into thinking over the first 30, 45 seconds it's going to be a ballad, and then it just becomes an anthem for an arena rock show, a chant, a sing-along. Could be the best we've heard in years when it comes to that. I can literally, every time I listen to this song now, hear an 8,000, 10,000 seat arena singing along with this. And then track 4, released last year as the first single, before we even knew we were getting a full album, is, of course, What Do I Got to Lose? And I did not delve into this, I guess, enough as I should have, because one of our favorite current rock icons here on the Fortress of Rock co-wrote this song, which would explain why it's so awesome. And that would be, yes, the jack of all trades, solo work, the Conspirators, Alter Bridge, and now co-writing with Sebastian Bach, yes, Miles Kennedy. So 4 songs in. Unbelievable. It's sounding like this is a contender for Album of the Year, but how many times have we said that in the past? Only to be let down. And guess what? We get let down. And this is where I pull everything back to the point of discussion that I began at the beginning. That's kind of convenient. I began it at the beginning. I'm very, very smart with words. But you need the other people in the band to have power. You need the other people in the band to be able to say, with a somewhat equal voice, yes, that's awesome. Go down that road and we'll help you. We'll embellish it. We'll make it as good or better than what you've got. Or you need to be able to say, no, that sucks. That blows goats. We don't want that on this album. And the ego overtakes it all. And for the rest of Child Within the Man, what we get is people, nobody in this group has the power that Sebastian Bach obviously does. It's his album, it's his baby. So nobody has the power to tell him, hey, you know what? This isn't really up to snuff. This isn't a great song. Maybe we should rework it or scrap it. Let's move on. Track 5, Hard Darkness. This is basically Sebastian Bach screeching, yelling, without a hook, without a real solid, catchy structure to a song. And this at track 5 is a hard stop with Hard Darkness. This is where you go, here we go. We're going back to all of the old Sebastian Bach solo albums because I have all of them. And it's the same problem with every single one as it is here with Child Within the Man, is that you get half an album and then he just thinks, okay, the rest of the songs mean something to me. They're personal to me. Doesn't really matter if they're catchy or if they have a hook like Skid Row did, because I'm telling you, You Skid Row fans out there know this. Those 3 albums, and we never know what would have happened. They might have fallen off a cliff and embarrassed themselves, but those 3 Skid Row albums, beginning to end, all 3 of them were rock solid. There was not a bad song on any of those 3 albums. And Sebastian Bach cannot say that about any of his solo albums. So you get Hard Darkness, track 5, no good. And all he's trying to do is prove at his age he can still screech and yell like a younger man. Track 6 is Future of Youth. I guess it's a little bit better than Hard Darkness, and then it's actually got a hook, but it's a very lame hook. Even with Orianthe playing guitar, really can't save it. Then you get track 7, Vendetta. Vendetta, you think now we're starting to maybe pull the album out of the ashes a little bit. I just still didn't like it. Now, I will admit the last 20 or 30 seconds, for some reason, rock harder than the rest of the song. And I think I can see where he thought this song was good. There was something in there that was really good and worth keeping, but he never polished it up, never made it reach its potential. Let's put it that way. Now we get to track 8, FU. No profanity here. Technically, he's talking fake you. And we get our third guitar guest star. This one features Billy Idol's guitarist Steve Stevens. And this is the one really redeeming song on the second half of the album. FU is very good. So again, we're looking at 11 songs. We're going to end up with 5 or 6 that are really, really good. Half an album, again, a theme. It just seems like it's a theme. Could you please put together a full, cohesive, solid album? Judas Priest is still doing it. The Black Crowes did it after taking so much time off. But FU is very good. Very, very good. But then the last 3 songs are really hit and miss. Track 9 is Crucify Me. Could be the weakest song on the album. Didn't get it. Didn't like it. I will admit tracks 10 and 11 have grown on me a little bit the more I've listened to the album. Track 10 is About to Break. It's got a decent riff. Track 11 is the requisite power ballad. To Live Again, after listening to the album 6 or 7 times, maybe, possibly growing on me a little bit, but still not great, still not worth recommending. So yes, the final summary, the final review for Child Within the Man, as much as it pains me to say it yet again, is stay away. Go back and listen to one of those 3 classic Skid Row albums, and hopefully the news that we passed along here on the Fortress in segment 1 about Skid Row reuniting becomes a reality. And I'll tell you this, I love The Gang's All Here, the last studio album from Skid Row, a heck of a lot more than I have liked any of Sebastian Bach's solo albums. So again, get these guys together. Get that dynamic back together and let them fight and argue. Creativity, get that creative juices flowing. Get that creativity. I can say that word, creativity. Get that flowing. Get that dynamic going where you fight and you bang heads, literally, figuratively, and you make great music again. Okay, my rant's over about Skid Row and Sebastian Bach. So let's move on to movies. Yes, I finally finished Bob Marley, One Love. Currently on Paramount Plus, of course, this is the story of reggae legend Bob Marley. And I will be upfront with you on this one. I am not a reggae fan. I have never been a big Bob Marley fan. But I will always watch a rock and roll biography because I am fascinated, as you would expect, by the lives of these men, these women, these groups, and what goes into the dynamic of making the music that we love. I think I gave you a little preview 2 or 3 weeks ago, but I finally did finish the movie, and it did redeem itself a little bit towards the end. If you split it up into thirds, the last third finally gets over the idol worship and the hero worship of Bob Marley, making it seem like he could do no wrong. And then you finally start to see a little bit of the flaws, warts and all. So that doesn't bother me. That's the thing. Hollywood doesn't want to tell you the negative. They never want to tell you the negative unless it fits an agenda, political or otherwise. And that's my problem with the first 2/3 of Bob Marley One Love, is that they gloss over the negative. Oh, Bob Marley never did anything wrong. They barely allude to his infidelity, his cheating on his wife Rita. And then one of the first scenes, he's smoking a joint, driving his 2 sons in a car. And we're supposed to go, "Oh, what a role model. What a role model." Because he preaches about one love and, I is I. And that stuff got really old really quickly for me, because it seemed like it was shallow and hypocritical, especially when they introduce early on his mentor, his Rastafarian mentor. Throughout the rest of the movie, before that, after that, you get a positive message of, yes, we should all get together, we should all love each other. Yes, hippy dippy stuff. But his mentor ends up preaching that, I don't believe in the white man's Jesus, I believe in the Rasta Jesus. Well, then now you're dividing us again. So what is it? Are you going to divide us, or are you going to bring us together? Nobody's saying you have to believe in one vision of God or Jesus, but at the same time, how about you accept all different versions, all different visions, instead of discounting or disparaging one over another? So I didn't like that at all. Again, the last third, finally, they acknowledge, yeah, Bob Marley cheated on Rita while they were married and fathered children. So we finally start to see the flaws in the immaculate facade of Bob Marley, which made me like the movie more, because then I felt like it was being more honest with me. And then we find out about his death, and I'll again be honest with you, I could not remember. I knew he died young, but not being a big follower, a big fan of Bob Marley, I could not remember how he died. So his death is very odd. It's scary and it's odd. I'll leave that for you guys to. I don't want to spoil too much for you. I probably, even though it's a true story and you could look it up on Wikipedia, true stories I don't feel as bad about spoiling, but still. I can't recommend Bob Marley One Love, but I will hang a lot of that on me just because he's not my type of music. And I will say the music in the movie is great. It's fantastic. the discussion, there's a great scene with a discussion about the cover of the classic album Exodus. There are great moments in this movie, and the music is definitely at the top of the list. But it feels, in the end, a little shallow, a little false. It feels like a little too much of rock and roll idolatry and sycophant. There's sycophants all over the place here. And again, nobody's willing to tell him, just like we've talked about in the past, just like we'll talk about in the future. Nobody willing to tell him, maybe this isn't the right thing to do. So, unfortunately, again, I can't recommend it. It's not terrible. I pick and choose. I'll admit it. I've watched Rocket Man, loved Bohemian Rhapsody, couldn't get through half an hour of Elvis. I mean, Elvis looked like that was a train wreck waiting to happen, despite how popular it was. But we'll see what we get down the road. We've got, I know, what Amy Winehouse opens this weekend. Not to a big fanfare, now to a wide release. But I think we're going to see down the road more and more of these types of movies, especially because Bob Marley, One Love, did so well at the box office. All right, 3 new songs to review this week. And we'll start off with Collective Soul, one of my favorite bands. Bluer Than So Blue, the second release from the double album out today, Here to Eternity, 20 songs. This is a tough review for me because I've listened to the album. Got it a couple hours ago from Amazon. I've listened to it. Of course, it's out there on Spotify, any of your preferred streaming services. Bluer Than So Blue. I told you last week, even though it was only out for a day, it jumped to the top of my personal charts. Those are, of course, coming in segment 4. And Bluer Than So Blue is by far the best song on Here to Eternity. And that should trouble you, not because you wouldn't expect the first or the second release to be one of the best songs on an album, but when you've got 20 songs to sift through, I don't want to spoil it. 2 weeks. 2 weeks from today, I will have my full review of Here to Eternity. But I will say that Bluer Than So Blue, which is the second track on Here to Eternity, Mother's Love, of course, is the first. Great 1-2 punch to lead off the double album. Outside of that, we're going to fall into the same terrible, sad pattern that we have talked about here with Sebastian Bach and so many songs and albums in the past few years. But again, Bluer Than So Blue, love it. Check it out. Then next up, Mike Campbell and the Dirty Knobs. Their first single, Dare to Dream, off the upcoming album Vagabonds, Virgins, and Misfits, out June the 14th. Uncanny, ridiculously eerie and uncanny how Mike Campbell sounds so much like Tom Petty. Problem? He doesn't write songs nearly as good as Tom Petty. Musically, absolutely solid. But you listen to Dare to Dream and you're waiting for a little bit of that Tom Petty sardonic wit, the cleverness in so many of the lyrics we've heard over the years and the decades. So sad that he's gone. So sad. And I have mentioned, though, thank God that the estate of Tom Petty understands that we want to hear the archives and all that material that's just sitting there in the vault, they get it. Alex Van Halen, Wolfgang Van Halen, take a lesson from Tom Petty's estate. But I digress. So Dare to Dream is a little bit too shallow, too much generic fluff for me. The message, of course, as you can tell by the title, oh, you can dare to dream and it'll come true and it'll be real. Mike Campbell telling everybody, look, I lived my rock and roll dream and you can too. Okay, do it in a little bit more creative and non-generic way, Mike. Because I'm sorry, Dare to Dream doesn't do it for me. Even though I really kind of liked the last Dirty Knobs album, External Combustion. This is a very, very lame lead off to the new album. So I will not recommend to you right now Dare to Dream. Hopefully, once we get another 2 or 3 songs in, we'll have better stuff. And then finally, a little bit of an unknown band. We've talked about them here in the past, but very cool trio called the Cold Stares. Bluesy, hard rockin' bluesy stuff, a little bit in the vein of your classic southern rock bands, a little bit of Stevie Ray Vaughan thrown in there. Of course, nobody could play guitar nearly as well as Stevie Ray Vaughan, outside of course, the great Eddie Van Halen. But the Cold Stares are a very cool 3-piece band that put together fantastic blues-based music. So a lesson to Mike Campbell. Let's tie in the last review to this review. Listen to the energy, the edge, the intensity you get from the Cold Stares on their new song, Horse to Water. And maybe Mike Campbell shouldn't be singing lead. Maybe they need to fix things, to mix things up. But Dare to Dream comes off as vanilla and generic compared to Horse to Water. We get a little bit, I'm not saying this is down and dirty, it's going to take over the airwaves, but it's got a hell of a better edge. It's more intense. Just like their past album, which we reviewed here within the last few years on the Fortress, it's got a little bit more something that Mike Campbell just sounds old and tired with the Dirty Knobs. He sounds like a photocopy of a photocopy of a photocopy of a Tom Petty song. Whereas the Cold Stares are a little hungrier, a little more intense. They just want it a little bit more. So listen to the Cold Stares, Horse to Water. So in recap, listen to Bluer Than So Blue from Collective Soul. Listen to Horse to Water from the Cold Stares. Unfortunately, stay away from Sebastian Bach, the new album, Child Within the Man. Stay away from the new Mike Campbell and the Dirty Knobs song, Dare to Dream. And stay away from the new Bob Marley biopic on Paramount Plus, One Love. We're heading back in time. After a quick 3 or 4 second music break, Doc Brown and I in the Rock and Roll DeLorean for I Want to Go Back. All right, Doc Brown, strapped in. I'm strapped in the Rock and Roll DeLorean in the Rock and Roll time stream. Segment 3 here, episode 144 of the Fortress of Rock on May the 17th, 2024. I am the Maestro, Kevin Crane. You know what time it is as we go back in time. Not trying to paraphrase Huey Lewis, but maybe I am. As we do I Want to Go Back, our tribute to the late, great Eddie Money. as we look back at anniversaries of classic album releases, birthdays, and moments in rock and roll history. But as we find the spots, the years, the days that we want to select, I'm going to take care of some business. So you found us somewhere. You found us somewhere, but you have options and you have choices. You can find the Fortress of Rock on Spotify, Pocket Casts, Apple, iHeartRadio, Overcast, Amazon Music, Castbox, and Audible. And don't forget to check out the Facebook page. A lot of fun stuff happening each and every weekend. This weekend, you're going to get right now, as you're listening to this, the Weekend Rock Project, where we give you a word, a theme, an idea, and you have to pick your favorite rock songs that fit. And this weekend, we're going with the old school. We're going with physical mail. Not like male, female, mail like stamps, sending, letters, any permutation, postman. Gee, I just gave that one to you on a silver platter. And despite the fact that postage is rising, this is free to play. So get on there on the Facebook page of the Fortress of Rock and put in your selection this weekend for our Weekend Rock Project. Again, the theme is mail, postage, letters, sending, stamps, whatever. Come up with something creative and fun that fits within that theme. And then Sunday, of course, is new Music Sunday. Every Sunday afternoon, I will post a video from YouTube. New song, probably something we've either reviewed this week in Breakdown, or it's coming up, or it was just last week. You get the idea. You get the drift. Just want you to have access to a new song, because we got to keep rock and roll alive with the new music. Not sure yet what we're going to do this weekend. I thought last weekend I had an idea of what I wanted to do, and then it turned around on me. So last weekend we did Mike Campbell and the Dirty Knobs, Dare to Dream, the song we just reviewed in Breakdown. Who knows? Check it out this coming Sunday on our Facebook page. And then, as much as I would like to think I know all about rock and roll, I don't. I know a lot. I know a hell of a lot, but I need help. I have sources for ideas in segment 1 and segment 3. Those sources, the primary sources, are ultimateclassicrock.com, thisdayinmusic.com, and the Van Halen News Desk.com. All right, so let's start off with anniversaries here, and I want to go back. Not a lot, I will admit. This is not the most earth-shattering, impressive week when it comes to rock and roll history, but there are a couple interesting things for us to discuss. Anniversary is May the 17th, 2022. Vangelis died. Of course, you would know Vangelis from the theme, the ultra popular theme back when I was younger, from Chariots of Fire. And then going back to May the 17th, 2012. The Queen of Disco, one of my all-time favorites. She is a goddess in my eyes. One of the greatest female singers of all time. Does not get nearly enough credit. Yes, it's not rock and roll, so you can Talk about Ann Wilson and Pat Benatar, but you cannot overlook Donna Summer. Yes, the disco era, as I've told you time and time again, one of those formative musical eras that helped to mold me into who I am today. But Donna Summer was just the best. Great voice, great songs, beautiful woman. On this day, May the 17th, 2012, sorry for the earlier hiccup, never want to disparage or demean the great, awesome, unbelievable Donna Summer, who died on this day in 2012. On this day, May the 17th, 1996, Johnny Guitar Watson passed away. On this day, May the 17th, 1990, Nirvana played their final concert. What? Their final concert with drummer Chad Channing. And then a certain gentleman by the name of Dave Grohl would step in, and the rest is rock and roll history. And then finally, for anniversaries, going back to May the 17th, 1963, even though it probably was overshadowed later on by its more popular incarnations. On this day in 1963, the first Monterey Folk Festival took place. Of course, it was spread out over 3 days, so don't get nitpicky on me. This was one of the 3 days. Of course, the more popular siblings I'm talking about are the Monterey Pop Festival and the Monterey Jazz Festival. All of this, of course, taking place in Monterey, California. All right, let's move on to birthdays. We start off with a big one, at least for me. If you love great rock and roll, a couple of these that we're going to talk about here at the beginning. I can't call them modern rock and roll because these bands have still been around for a long, long time. We're talking decades, but to me, they feel newer. When we talk about a Motley Crue, Rat, Van Halen, we're going back to the 80s, the 70s, predominantly for their heydays. So anybody after the grunge era who came out late 90s and beyond, to me, I kind of look at as a newer band. So May the 17th, 1973, they have become one of my favorite bands. And this band is the only constant member. Primary songwriter, lead singer for Queens of the Stone Age. And I have been mispronouncing his name for years. And I apologize. I just recently, over the last year or so, found out that it's not Josh Homme. I tried to do a little bit of, I guess, a European thing on it. But it's actually Josh Homme. Like, hey, you're my homie. The great, unrivaled, unparalleled Josh Homme of Queens of the Stone Age, born on this day in 1973. Born on this day in 1968, May the 17th, the first drummer for Pearl Jam. And I'm going to botch this name. I'm telling you, I'm going to botch this name. Dave Abruzzese. Pearl Jam drummer from 1991 to 1994. Now, of course, that was the early wheelhouse where they made their mark. And then I believe Jack Irons came in, and then of course now we've had Matt Cameron for quite a while. But Dave Abruzzese was the big time recorded drummer for Pearl Jam, 1991 to 1994. And then another one of those bands, newer, again, quote unquote, newer bands, as I like to think of them. And a lot of people think this guy is a rock god. I am not impressed, but one of those situations where I will give credit where credit is due. Born on this day, May the 17th, 1965, Trent Reznor, of course. Just like Josh Homme with Queens of the Stone Age, Trent Reznor pretty much the only true member, constant, the leader, the singer, songwriter for 9 Inch Nails. Then we move back to May the 17th of 1959, Paul Di'Anno, one of those lost figures in rock and roll history. If you are a metalhead, you know the name. You know who Paul Di'Anno is. He sang lead vocals on the first 2 Iron Maiden albums before Bruce Dickinson came aboard. So I would say that was Iron Maiden and Killers, if memory serves. Then let's move on. We talked about disco a little bit earlier with Donna Summer. Let's move on to some R&B. Born on this day, May the 17th, 1953, George Johnson. Going by the last name, you can probably figure out we're talking about one of the brothers Johnson. And they had what I think is one of the most underrated songs of the 70s, if not all time, when it comes to R&B and funk, Strawberry Letter 23. So George Johnson of the Brothers Johnson, born on this day in 1953. Then finally, believe it or not, I'm having issues with my sources on this one. I've got disputing information. One source says this guy was born on this day in 1949. Another one says 1948. But either way, he was born on this day. And that is Bill Bruford, who was the original drummer for Yes, and then later moved on and played with King Crimson. So there you go, everybody. That is I Want to Go Back. Doc Brown is turning us around in the rock and roll time stream. We're heading back to the Fortress of Rock. But you know we're not done yet. You get a quick, cheesy 3 or 4 second music break now, and that's changing in a couple weeks. I know I've talked about this on and off over the last few months. You should not see the difference outside of the fact that maybe, possibly, we're going to do straight through every episode starting in June. There might not be any breaks. We'll still keep our 4 segments intact, but you're just going to have to live with me saying, hey, segment 1's over, here's segment 2. Segment 2's over, here's segment 3. It's going to be awkward, it's going to be weird, but you can blame Spotify for that, for cheapening out and not allowing us the tools that they've given us for years to record. So we have to go to other venues, other platforms, even though you will still be able to find us on Spotify. We'll probably have more detail on this transition, by the way, over the next 2 weeks. You've got 2 more episodes under the current guidelines, the current recording format, before things might change a little bit. But again, 95% of the burden is on me. A very tiny sliver of an amount you might notice. But Wrap It Up is next. Our look into the future and what we're going to talk about over the next 3, 4, 5 weeks here on the Fortress of Rock. Quick blip of a break, and I will be right back. Okay, final segment here. We've pulled the DeLorean into the garage here at the Fortress of Rock, pulled the drawbridge up over the moat, shutting everything down, but we just have a few more minutes left for you as we have discussed the present of rock and roll, the past of rock and roll, and now it's time to talk about doodaloo, 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 crystal ball, the future of rock and roll here on the Fortress of Rock. What you can expect from us in the next month. Let's get into it. Next week, episode 145, dropping Friday night, May the 24th. The new album from the Kings of Leon. Can we please have fun? And as I mentioned earlier, in Breakdown, I'm just depressed. I am just so depressed that we can't seem to get a great full album from anybody anymore. The only two so far this year, 2024, that I would say are solid beginning to end. So obviously my top two contenders right now for album of the year are Invincible Shield by Judas Priest and Happiness Bastards from the Black Crowes. Otherwise, we are getting, I'm sorry for the language, half-ass efforts from a lot of these bands. And I mentioned Collective Soul. Now I'm telling you about Kings of Leon. I mentioned Sebastian Bach, obviously reviewing that album earlier. So maybe that's a little bit of foreshadowing. I shouldn't do that. Oh, it's great, kids. It's great. You can't wait to hear Can We Please Have Fun? I'm not going to lie to you. I will never, ever lie to you. I have listened to Can We Please Have Fun 2 or 3 times already. It's, unless it gets a lot better, 4 or 5 listens in. This is another example of a band who put all the good stuff out first, which is what you would expect. Wait for next week. Kings of Leon, Can We Please Have Fun? Episode 145 on May the 24th. And then again, referring back to Breakdown, as we talked about the phenomenal song Bluer Than So Blue, I had my trepidations. I had my worries about Collective Soul announcing a double album. And that album is out today on the 17th of May. Collective Soul's Here to Eternity, 20 songs, is out right now. And we will review that episode 146 on the final day of May, May the 31st, 2024. And it should have been one album. I've only listened to it once, but I'm telling you right now, this is hubris. This is Ed Roland thinking anything I create is fantastic, and somebody should have told him, no, Ed, no, it's not. I think this would have been an unbelievable single album, as is the case with most double albums. Would have been unbelievable if you'd whittled it down to 12 songs, but 20, way too many. But again, I'm not selling it. So check out our breakdown segment in 2 weeks for my review of Collective Soul's Here to Eternity. In 3 weeks, we're going to go back in time. There's 2 great archival releases coming out. And so I'm going to have to pick and choose. I could do both. But we've got Rick Emmett, 90 to 95, 1990 to 1995 Diamonds, his best solo work after he left Triumph. That'll be out in time for us to review it on episode 147 on June the 7th, as will be Rat. Rarities. Now this is, whereas Rick Emmett, it's a full collection. I believe it's 11 songs. Rat Rarities, it's 9 tracks. There's a lot of stuff here that I really don't think, I know I should not go in with a preconceived notion, but I'm really not impressed with what I'm seeing outside of, I want to hear the first ever recorded version of Round and Round. So maybe we'll do both. Those will be coming, those looks back in time. And we don't normally do that. You know that here on the Fortress. But with Rick Emmett, Triumph, Rat, those bands are exceptions to the rule. And then things really pick up, because 4 weeks from now, episode 148, dropping on June the 14th, we're looking at possibly a review of the new Bon Jovi album, Forever. Yes, I have not been kind to John Bon Jovi as of late, but I feel an obligation to still review his new music. But we will also have our latest live review, concert review for you. We will give you our review of Styx, Foreigner, and John Waite, live from Grand Rapids, Michigan. So that will hit on the 14th. That show is the 11th of June. And then 5 weeks out, yeah, we're even going to go 5 weeks out for you, because it helps me to plan as much as it helps you. 5 weeks out, the new album from Mike Campbell and the Dirty Knobs, which we just heard about last week. Vagabonds, Virgins, and Misfits. We just reviewed Dare to Dream and Breakdown. That will be your featured album review in 5 weeks. Episode 149 on June the 21st. I'm not going out any farther than that. I can't. I can't plan my life any farther out than that. Because as you know, life happens. All right, so it's that time when we talk about our top album and our top songs of the week. Of course, that's my tribute to the Billboard charts the way they used to be when they actually mattered, and the great Casey Kasem and America's Top 40. So usually it's no surprise, and in this case, unlike last week, we are going with our featured album review. I usually go with the album that I listen to the most over the past 7 days. Now, on occasion, if the album is really, really bad, I'll go with another one that I happen to listen to. But in this case, even though I was a little disappointed, Child Within the Man by Sebastian Bach is our number one album of the week here on the Fortress of Rock. Your top songs. I will take one song from Child Within the Man because I have not given it enough credit to this point. It's been out for a couple weeks, and it finally needs to get its due and be acknowledged as a top song of the week. That is the one true best song on Child Within the Man. That is Hold On to the Dream by Sebastian Bach. And yes, I will continue to be a hypocrite. As I've already told you, Sebastian Bach's new album is another hit and miss affair, with all the first releases, the first singles being the best songs, and after that it's very tepid. But I've already alluded to the fact that you could say the same thing about the new Kings of Leon album. So the album is out, but the fourth single came out at the same time, and the fourth single is actually really good. So you get the first four singles, the first four releases from Can We Please Have Fun, and you're like, oh my God, this is going to be one of their best albums ever. And then the rest of it leaves a lot to be desired. But that fourth single, along with Hold On to the Dream from Sebastian Bach, shares top song honors this week. That is Nowhere to Run from Kings of Leon. Now, we have been able to winnow down. We had a backlog on songs, so we took care of a lot of those this week, but we still have a few left. Bon Jovi, second single, second release from their upcoming album Forever is Living Proof. And then, of course, we've still got to finish off their documentary on Hulu. I've told you guys I watched the first half, the first two episodes earlier. I'm trying to get through it. You know, I'm having my issues with John Bon Jovi right now, but we will get through it eventually, just like we did with Bob Marley, One Love. So Living Proof, as well as our review of the Bon Jovi documentary, Thank You, Good Night, coming soon. Still looking to review Mark Knopfler and his Record Store Day EP, The Boy. Of course, kind of a short thematic concept album about an aging boxer. And then this double-sided A-side, B-side release from the Hold Steady. No promise of a new album, but Radar and Leda and The Death of the Punchline. So hopefully now that we've got it down to just those, we can knock those out here in the next couple weeks here on the Fortress of Rock. Next weekend is Memorial Day weekend, the official kickoff to summer. I hope you guys have an unbelievable, safe, happy, and fun Memorial Day weekend. Of course, you will talk to me one more time on the 24th before the festivities really kick off. I personally, very excited, thankful for a great friend of mine who has got us tickets to go see the Indianapolis 500. The first time I will see it live in over 40 years. But that does not stop the rock and roll. Of course, we will be listening to music going down, coming back. And my friend is a huge Metallica fan. He is really into hard rock, so trust me, we will listen to some good stuff. I will try to force some Christopher Cross on him. Just kidding. Maybe. But I will once again next Friday give you these same well wishes for the upcoming holiday weekend, the upcoming unofficial start of summer. Be safe, be happy, love the one you're with. I am the Maestro, Kevin Crane, and you are who you are. Have a great night. Have a great weekend. We will talk to you in 7 days. Peace out.